So recently, Ice Cube was interviewed by Tucker Carlson, and I thought that there were a few key points that I wanted to touch on. I found the interview to be very interesting. I love having conversations. I love seeing conversations between people who have somewhat different backgrounds and different worldviews, and just hearing them hash things out. But there were a few key points, in particularly in the areas of law enforcement and race relations that I found to be very interesting. Check it out.
Obviously, you're going to take abuse for doing that. Like, why would you do that?
Because I think it's silly not to talk to people. I think whether we agree or not,
right,
that has nothing to do with it. You know, it's like, this is what it's all about. Let's talk about it. Let's debate. And you know, I've been shut out.
That sounds like right-wing extremism. And what aboutism?
You know what, man, I'll say this. There's a lot. I'll say this. There's a lot that I agree with from Ice Cube, but there's probably more. Well, I can't say more. There's a lot that I also disagree with him. When he talks about the plight of the Black community, I think it is largely due to many of our own poor choices, especially in this modern era. Now, if we go back 60 plus years ago, I think there's a completely different argument to be made. But I believe that a lot of the problems that we've developed over the years, in more recent years, have been our own undoing. Because it's hard to, especially in light of when you look at the family and the things that we've done to deteriorate the family, especially in light of the sexual revolution, how we got totally caught up in that. And the Black community is ravaged because of so many broken homes. And I think that's a massive issue. But in spite of all that, I love the fact that Ice Cube is kind of like his own dude. He's like, I'm my own man. I'm going to say what I want to say. I'm going to talk to who I want to talk to. And if you don't like it, that's your problem. I love that about him. I wish more people were bold like that. Granted, he's got the money. He's established. No one's going to, I mean, you know what? They can hate on him. But when it's all said and done, I don't know too many that are going to get in his face and try to be like, try to punk him out. If he goes on a Breakfast Club, I'm sure they're going to treat him differently than if Senator Tim Scott goes on the Breakfast Club. It's going to be a completely different conversation. And it's just because of that quote unquote street cred that he's developed over the decades. Is it fair? Probably not, but it's just how it is.
But I've been shut out. You know, some platforms will not have me on.
Why?
They don't like that I'm, an independent thinker. I'm not part of the herd. I'm not part of the go along to get along gang, so to speak. So, I'm an outsider. And so, I'm not part of the club. So I have to go places for one that I'm welcome, and where I can voice my opinion without somebody, saying I'm a bad person and that they never want to have me on their platform again.
What platforms have banned you?
I've been I tried to go on The View. They didn't have me on The View.
Why?
Well, a few of the guests just really didn't like where I was coming from. So
it's probably because of his stance on the vaccine, how he spoke out so fiercely, so strongly against it. He tried to keep it on the down low, but then once it came out, he said that he wasn't trying to go get something shot up in his body that came out so quick. And I agree with that 100%. And at the same time, what are you going to do with Ice Cube? You get him on your show and you start mocking him or try to make him look bad. That ain't going to look good for you. It just won't. Because I'm sure he's not going to sit back there and take that while you sit up there and try to mock him and try to belittle him. He ain't going to take it. And then it's not going to look good, especially on The View when you're supposed to be so woke and so socially conscious.
A few of the hosts, So that's what I was told by the producers. I don't know if the producers was just copping out and using some of the hosts to not have me come on and explain myself, but
you'd be a good booking for them.
And also the fact that he actually spoke to the Trump administration when Trump was in office, because that is like saying that you tried to kick it with Adolf Hitler to a lot of these folks on the left, these extremists. I know, doesn't make any sense to me either. Why wouldn't you want to talk to the most powerful man in the world at the time when you're trying to you have an agenda that you're trying to push forth that you think may be able to benefit the black community? Why wouldn't you want to talk to the president? But they clearly didn't see it like that.
I've been on there before.
Yeah.
You know, it's just when I've became an independent thinker, when I've, you know, I'm not, you know, I don't follow their brand of politics, I guess.
But if you can't think for yourself, then you're not really free, are you?
No, you're not. You're not. But I've been excluded. I've been excluded on Oprah. You know,
On Oprah?
On Oprah, yeah, I've been excluded. Yeah, man.
I would think you'd be the person Oprah would want to promote. I mean, you grew up in South Central. You were successful at a young age. You have dignity. You say what you think. Like, I thought that was the goal.
My honest opinion, the elites are the main ones who want you to think that you are constantly being held down. They don't want you to think that you can rise above. There was a time when that kind of talk would have been welcomed in the black community, but not today. Definitely not today. You are oppressed, and it's because of your skin color, and there's no other reason. It has nothing to do with anything that you did. Your problems are largely because of the white man. That's what they want you to think.
Me too. You know, I don't know what it is, but, you know, several of my, you know, I had a movie called Barbershop, you know.
Yeah, I remember.
That I wasn't invited to participate with the cast. I produced a show called Black White, and it was a very controversial show. And once again, they had the whole cast on, but I wasn't invited. And so I don't know. I don't know what that's
on Oprah's show.
Yeah, so I don't know what that's.
But Oprah's obviously a saintly, godlike figure who's revered by all decent people. Why would she exclude you?
I really don't know. You know, that's something that I would love to find out. But I can't tell you, you know, if there's a single thing that I've done or said to her.
Have you noticed that it is more controversial to criticize Oprah than to burn the American flag?
Really?
Seems that way. I've never heard anybody criticize Oprah.
I think these days, especially on social media, you're hearing more people push back and speak out against Oprah, especially in light of allegations of her being involved in some sexual misconduct. Now, whether it's true or not, I have no idea. But I think you're starting to hear more people push back on Oprah. But there's a reality in the black community that there are some people that are basically untouchable. You can't talk about MLK. You can't talk about Beyonce. You can't talk about Barack Obama. You can't talk about Oprah Winfrey. You can't talk about Nelson Mandela. You can't say anything bad about any of them people. Regardless of what the facts, what the truth may be, when you dig into their history, regardless of that, they are basically untouchable. You cannot say anything negative about them or you will receive all kinds of heat and hate.
Do you think it's political or do you think it's deeper than that? I mean, you're not like a right winger.
No.
No. You don't even seem that political.
No, I'm not really. I'm pretty much, you know, just want to do right by the people, you know. So if that comes through political means, that comes through the private sector, wherever it comes, you know, I'm down to work with whoever's down to do something right for the people.
So I remember reading you say something along the lines of, I didn't vote for Trump. I'm not a Trump voter. You actually attacked Trump at one point, but you were willing to meet with Trump. Do you think that crossed the line?
Absolutely.
I think some people didn't like that, but I think it's idiotic. You know, enemies meet.
Right.
You know, they talk. I'm pretty sure there's some communication between Russia and the Ukraine right now. Somebody's on the phone talking to somebody, trying to come up with a solution. So we just got to talk. That's the only way we're going to work this out. You know, I know when the talking stops, the fighting starts. You know, a lot of people they, think I'm a, Republican. I'm a right winger. Just because I was willing to speak to the Trump organization.
Not like there's anything wrong with being a conservative, being on the right. Honestly, I think when you look at it, I almost guarantee you that if I was to sit down and have a conversation with Ice Cube, and I'm not saying I'm going to change his whole worldview, but I would be able to get him to understand why I vote the way that I do. I'm pretty sure that I can do that. Where he would sit back and be like, at least one time during the conversation. With my background in law enforcement, I guarantee you that I can have a conversation with him about certain aspects of the Black community, certain aspects about policing where we may disagree, but then there might be some things when it comes to police where we agree completely. And there's a couple of points that he made that I'll bring up here shortly that I feel as if he was spot on. I just question his overall perspective. But when we talk about the life issue, when we talk about the Black communities remain basically at 12%, pretty much since Roe v. Wade, due to the 20 million babies that have been aborted over the last 50 plus years. When we talk about the individual decision to make poor decisions with who you lay up with, when you talk about the choice of a father to walk away from his kids, which I know all too well because I did that at one point in my life, ashamedly so. That's what I did in my family, with my family, and more than one point in my life. And I'm not proud to admit that, but that's the path that I was going down before the Lord woke me up and saved me. So when I talk about that, when I talk about the current culture, if I spoke to him about the current society, all the foolishness, basically all the foolishness we've seen in over the last 10 plus years has come from the political left. All of the division that we see, whether we're talking about the LGBT movement issues and all things associated with that, and the destruction that has come about, all the racial tension, the issues with the border, all of the foolishness that we see going on in our society, the poor education system in our public schools, you can send it back to the political left, and their hand is involved in it. You look at all the craziness going on in the worst cities in our nation, there's someone who's a Democrat. There are multiple Democrats running the show. Guaranteed. That's just how it is. I'm not saying the Republican Party is so perfect, but who's the one saying that a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old can determine what gender they are? Who's saying that? Who's the ones that have the border wide open and we got all kinds of fentanyl and people coming across the border when we can barely take care of our own people? Who's pushing that? Who's pushing those policies? You got people waking up now, Chicago, New York, these so-called sanctuary cities for immigrants are realizing how big of a problem this really is. Now that it's impacting their communities. They're waking up to the plight of all those people who've been saying this border is an issue. It's not doing us any good. We have people here that we're not taking care of. How are we going to open the door and try to feed everybody? It's like a father, it's like a family who opens the door and allows strangers and homeless people in when they're not even feeding their own kids. That's how bad it is.
Administration, I mean. And I was willing to speak with the Biden administration as well.
Have you?
One guy in the administration, but it didn't go anywhere. It was basically a, take my temperature kind of call. We'll get to it. But they never got to it or never planned to. Matter of fact, the guy left the administration. So, after talking to him for a year or so, he was gone. And then, we were left really with no one to continue the conversations.
What do you think of Biden?
I don't think he's given the people who put him in exactly what they thought they were going to get from him.
Understatement of the
his
year.
Most loyal voters, according to the polls anyway, are Black voters, particularly Black women. Mm-hmm. And those numbers don't seem to change. So no matter what can happen. So do you expect they ever will change?
Whether they become independents and not vote for anybody who.
I wish it was that simple. And do I believe that some changes are taking place in the Black community? Yes. I think some people are really waking up to the foolishness that's happening. There seems to be more and more Black people, Black conservatives, who are brave enough to speak out and not afraid of the backlash. But man, I'm telling you, I think it's going to take something pretty major to influence the way the overall Black collective perspective, because there are a lot of people are afraid to go against the grain. A lot of people are afraid. You can look at everything that the left does, but yet each and every turn they say those guys over there, they're racist. They're racist over there. It's an unquestionable fact. It's been repeated so many times that it's an unquestionable assumption.
They have to do something to earn it. If they don't earn it, why are you going down there and pulling that lever?
Because the other side hates you. That's the pitch they make.
Yep.
We may suck, but the other side hates you.
Yeah.
You're supposed to dance with the person you brought.
Yeah.
You know? And the person that brought you to the dance, you guys are supposed to dance together.
But if we have a good understanding of history and we don't believe in the nonsense of the party switch, completely fabricated, then we'll know that the people that brought us to the dance, the primary people who were advocating for our freedoms was the Republican Party. It's just a matter of history. And if you look at the stance of the historical Republican, even though every side has shifted or drifted further and further to the left, but if you look at the overall stance of the Republican Party from the past, honoring God, country, individuality, and now things haven't changed. Things have not changed much.
And if that doesn't happen, you got to go find another dancing partner before the night is up and the music stops.
What do you think of Kamala Harris?
I mean, obviously she's a great politician to be able to become the vice president of the country. I don't know how effective she is at her job.
What's your view of the police at this point?
It's the same, you know. It really is, you know. It's like looking at, like, what's your view of the military? Like, they're the military. They're always going to be the military. If I asked you this in 1946, you'd be like, they're the military.
Yeah.
So it's a fraternity. It's an organization that does things a certain way. And I think their philosophy sometimes is detrimental to the people they're serving, because I think cops have a win and make it home philosophy. Win whatever battles you have in the street, make it home at night.
Now, I want to push back a little bit on his. I'm not sure he's saying that the policing hasn't changed since 1946. Unless you're delusional, anyone with any ounce of common sense would know better, would know that that's false. All you have to do is look at the numbers. I'll link some studies down in the description below, some studies done by various groups that demonstrate that the level of police brutality, the amount of shootings of minorities in particular, has dramatically decreased over the last 50, 60 years. So if that's what he's saying, he is way off. But when he says that when he says that law enforcement does things a certain way and they have a win and go make sure that they make it home at night mentality, and sometimes they do things to the detriment of the people they're serving, there's truth to that. There's some truth to that. It's not universal. I would dare say it's not even the majority. But the mindset of, I'm going to make sure that I make it home at night, regardless of what I'm faced with today while I'm on duty, that's the mindset you better have while you're out there as a cop. You better have that mentality. Now, of course, you don't want to do that while violating someone's rights. You want to fight crime lawfully within the boundaries of the law. That's how you get respect. And again, not to ever toot my own horn while I was out there as a cop, because Lord knows I wasn't trying to be super cop. I wasn't trying to make the most arrests, but I had the respect of the community because people knew that I actually gave a damn about them. People knew that I actually cared. I cut you a break If I think that you're trying to do, if you're on the straight and narrow, you appear to be. If you have a warrant and it's a low level warrant, and I know that if I have the authority to take you to jail or take your car away or whatever, I might cut you a break because I understand that your whole life might be thrown into a spiral and could cause you to end up back in jail. So I would take those things into consideration before I made my choices. But again, going back to what I said, there is some truth to what he said about some people in law enforcement doing whatever it takes to make sure that they make it home at night. And like I said, I agree with that. But once you start thinking about breaking the law, that's where the problems start.
And that's actually the most important thing. And everything else, people's rights, doing things the right way, being totally fair and square all the time and not, being a little aggressive, all that comes second to win the encounter, make it home at night. And you can't really fault somebody for thinking that way as a police officer, but that's the philosophy. So everything else comes second to that.
I give him respect for at least acknowledging. Now, we're not talking about the breaking the law part. That's not what I'm talking about here. But I give him props for acknowledging the reality of the difficulties of the job. He didn't come out and clearly say that, but you do fight crime. And I always say that over and over again. I think people forget that. As a cop, you go out there and you're facing the public. You're facing, sometimes you come across people who are hell-bent on not going to prison. And if that means that they have to go through you, whether that means physically or with their vehicle or with a bullet, then they'll do it. And that's an unfortunate aspect of the job, but it is a reality. And it seems as if that he kind of understands that perspective a bit. But I agree with him 100%. Once you start violating someone's rights and start, skating around the law, you got a problem. And that person needs to go.
So guy might not care if he violated your rights. He's going to win this encounter. He's going to make it home tonight. And that's all that matters. And sometimes I think that's what we see is an organization hell-bent on winning and not a fraternity or organization hell-bent on upholding the law and doing everything right or by the book, so to speak.
I want to throw this in there. I can recall there were some times where we would have a knucklehead in the area, in our area command on patrol, who we knew they were out there slinging dope. We knew they had guns, but they always skirted the boundaries of the law. They knew enough of the law to where they knew that they might have been trespassed from going on a particular property, but they knew the sidewalk. They could walk on the sidewalk, or they could be across the street. And I took pride in my squad, some of my old squads, we took pride on working within the boundaries of the law and figuring out how we can get them. Man, I enjoyed that. Man, how can we get this dude? Going through going through the Nevada revised statutes, the laws here in Nevada, looking at the laws and figuring out, okay, well, where's he at? What's the distance he can be away from a specific structure that he's been trespassed from? And we just would work it. We would have little powwows trying to figure things out. That's what I enjoyed doing. And also I saw some individuals, even some squads at times, who had no problem with violating people's rights. And that always rubbed me the wrong way. That always bothered me. And I would typically say something to them. No problem speaking my mind. So again, I disagree with some of the things that he says, but at the same time, there's a lot of truth to what he was saying.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's just the nature of that fraternity.
Maybe of organizations.
Yeah. It's they come with a philosophy, and, you can try to buck it if you want to, but more than likely they're going to get you out the way and stay in formation.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the case in some instances, but not always. I think it depends on the individual, your personality, how clearly you articulate yourself, how strongly and firmly you articulate yourself. Because I don't think there's anywhere I went where people were intentionally trying to get rid of me because I went against the grain. People may not have liked me. I may not have been the most popular officer on patrol, but you knew that when I was there, that if something went down, I had your back. But at the same time, I didn't get down with doing all the foolishness. And people pretty much left me alone when it came down to that. They knew there's some dudes out there, the bad apples, who unfortunately managed to stick around, whether it was in the jail or on the streets. And there were a few of them. There were very few. They were not the majority. When it came down to the foolishness, they didn't bring it. They didn't bring it in front of me, not at all. And I think I developed that over time. I developed that. I started doing that from day one as a corrections officer, and I think I developed all the other aspects of that just over time. So I think you can stand firm on your beliefs and on your core values without compromising.
Do you think that it's harder to be a man in America now than it was when you were a kid?
Yep.
Yes. Saying what you feel, being yourself, is what they call toxic. You know, we shouldn't be called toxic for our instincts and for, you know, I was born this way. What are you talking about? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Why can't we be ourselves? We were born this way too.
So there are some groups, like if I say I'm trans, and people say that's great, you were born that way, we affirm you. But if you say I'm just a dude with male instincts, you're not affirmed. You're
That's good.
attacked.
Yeah, I mean, everybody doesn't really have to affirm you. You know, if I wake up and say, you know, I feel like a pigeon, and I want everybody to treat me like a pigeon. Some people may say, whatever, Q, we treat you like a pigeon. But some people may choose to be like, dude, no. That's your world.
Yeah.
I'm not part of it. And I have to be ready for that.
Man, don't Cube know that that's basically, he's like saying cuss words right there? You have to affirm someone in whatever foolishness they want to jump into these days. That's how pathetic we've grown as a society. You want to believe this about yourself? Not only is it that I believe this craziness about myself, but you had better believe it as well. That's how far off the deep end we've gone. When you open the door up to foolish concepts like moral relativism, the LGBT movement, when you're trying to affirm everything as having equal value, your so-called marriage to your husband as a man is equal to my marriage to my wife, even though there's so much more value that we bring to the world, procreating a more natural union. We were designed for each other. The reality that certain relationships are actually physically harmful, physically damaging. It's just a reality. And one aspect of that reality is that a lot of these LGBT activities are brought about through trauma at some point in the individual's life when they were younger. Whether it's neglect, some form of sexual abuse, they are inherently linked. And that is something that's been studied for decades, even in nations and countries that have been much more affirming than we were as Americans historically. Those issues are linked to trauma. And that's another reason why I don't think we should be celebrating them or trying to act as if they're on par with the relationship, a marital relationship between a husband and a wife. But again, you are expected to affirm someone in whatever lunacy that they say is factual.
Big world out here. Everybody doesn't have to adhere to me.
That's called narcissism, right?
Yeah, it seems like it. Yeah, seems like you're trying to bend the universe to your will, and it don't work like that.
We've been talking almost all day now. You haven't mentioned race a single time. We've mentioned economics, rich and poor, a number of times. Do you think that we overplay the role of racial conflict in American life?
Yes. I think race, it takes up too much space. There's people that we all have in our lives who are same race that we can't stand. And there's people in our lives from other races that we get along with way better. So it's not about race. It's not about color and gender and this and that. It's about who do you connect with.
I remember one of my homies sent me a instant message or a direct message on Instagram, and he pointed out somebody was complaining about all the judges that Trump had put in office and how the vast majority of them were white dudes, and he got all upset. So I just asked him, I said, think about, like, let's look at that politically. Let's look at who's in office around our nation where Black folks congregate predominantly. Think about Atlanta, Philly, Baltimore, LA, Chicago, New York. Those areas have had a large number of Black folks running the political game, running everything, for many of them for decades. And what is the fruit of that? What have we seen? Crime going through the roof, homelessness, jobless rate through the roof in a lot of places. Not all of them, but drugs running rampant. I tell folks that instead of focusing on the skin color of the individual who's running for office, look at what they stand for. It was Barack Obama who lit up the White House in the rainbow colors, dishonoring God, dishonoring the rainbow that God used as a covenant to mankind, especially if we're a Christian, if we're Christians and we're examining these issues. Look at Chicago right now. Shootings left and right. I remember during the Trump administration, he tried to send some federal agents and law enforcement up there to try to help them calm things down. But old Lori Lightfoot rejected it. But she asked for help when Joe Biden was in office. Like, help that make sense to me. And then you see what's going on in Chicago right now. Black folks are pushing back against this immigration policy that they have. You got these immigrants attacking some of the people in their communities. You got money being spent on these folks, these immigrants, and your own residents, your own legal residents aren't even being taken care of. Forget skin color. Focus on their policies. What are they going to bring? What comes along with them? What comes along with them when they take office? What policies come along? That's where our focus needs to be. And then another point I'd like to bring up is, I'm sure there's a high percentage of us who have been married and divorced. And if you look at it, if your spouse or wife was Black and you're Black, there are Black folks out there that you don't like. And there are Black folks out there that you can't trust, especially if they cheated on you or messed around on you. So you have to go into choosing who leads our country, who leads our cities, looking at policy, not looking at whether they spitting game or they got the little head rocking going on or where they could play a saxophone while they're talking to you. Look at what they've stood for historically. Look at what they voted for and see if that jives with your values, especially if you're a Christian, especially if you're a believer. Does their stance on the whole LGBT movement jive with my stance on marriage between a man and a woman? Does their stance on gender, or quote unquote gender affirming care, jive with my moral values that God made them male and female? Does their stance on the border jive with my understanding of loving your neighbor, but at the same time taking care of home first? Does their idea of just doing constant handouts jive with my understanding that if a man doesn't work, neither shall he eat? These are all the things that we need to understand.
You know, who do you vibrate with? You know what I mean? Who's on the same wavelength?
Exactly.
Who wants to be the same kind of person? Who wants to do the right thing when you want to do the right thing? That's who you connect with. So I think a lot of people make a lot of money off of the racists fighting against each other and bickering. And They the ones who push it in our face all the time that we're separate.
Think about the Benjamin Crumps, your Al Sharptons, your Jesse Jacksons, your Ibram X. Kennedy. You can just name it. Everyone involved in this whole woke ideology, BLMs, they're making a ton of money off of pushing division and hate. And that's quoted, that's a famous quote that goes back to what Booker T. Washington said. There are people who benefit from this. We have to be able to read between the lines, folks, and see what's going on, what's truly going on behind the scenes. Do these people truly care about us, or do they have another agenda?
And
does feel like there's more of that, doesn't there?
Yeah, it seems like it's like you're stuck in a bad movie and you can't get out. Like you can't find the exit, and it continues to play on the screen, and you're just running around looking for the exit, and this bad movie continues to just haunt you day by day by day by day. You know, that's what we're caught in. A never-ending, winless battle of, you know, of race and color, and we're worried about, you know, where you from, and, you know, hip hop. What's great about hip hop, like it was a saying in hip hop, early hip hop. I think Rakim coined this phrase. You know, it ain't where you from, it's where you at. You know, and it's so true. It's not about where you come from. It's about where you at right now.
I'm not imagining that this stuff is being pushed on us, right?
No.
Much more than in, say, 1986.
Yes. Yes, I think so. Because in 1986, you had movies and television, and it was all scripted, and we knew this is a scripted show. But I think now you have so many so-called reality shows that basically push the same thing, but in a reality-like setting. So, you know, you'll watch a movie on race, okay? And you flip the channel now, you're watching a somewhat like documentary reality show that's highlighting and magnifying race and status and where you belong in this country and where you don't. And, you know, we're highlighting the bad guys here. We're highlighting the good guys, you know. It's just, it's always really showing controversy and pitting each other against each other. And with the reality shows, you know, controversy sells. So they're not showing people getting along. What they want to get to is the fight, the conflict, you know, the argument, the throwing of the bottles, the, you know, the turmoil.
The police shooting, the allegation of police brutality, controversy sells. That's why you don't see the cops who do the right thing, even though that happens exponentially more than the corrupt cop, for instance. You don't really see that. They push the one who abuses their power. They show the white man who shoots a innocent black kid, but they don't really highlight the black kid who shoots the innocent white person. It's all media manipulation, y'all. It's all media manipulation. Now, there's more to the interview, and I'm going to link it below. But, man, the last thing I want to say is, if I know Ice feels a certain way about the struggles in the black community, and he feels that, and I mentioned it earlier on, he feels as if we are missing out on certain opportunities because there might be some level of suppression or people trying to keep us from that. But I think that there might be a bit of inconsistency here with what he's saying. Let me see if I can push back. And I know he'll never see my video, but if we know that there are people out there who are seeking to manipulate our thoughts with the images that we see, in the news that we watch, in the social media clips that go viral, is it even remotely possible that that can also impact the way we view issues within our own communities? Now, is there some level, is there to some degree, some people out there who are racist and who don't want to see Black folks succeed? Clearly, there are. Obviously, that's the case. But I definitely don't believe, and as a Black man, 53 years old, I've been around a long enough and I've dealt with a ton of actual racism in my day to see the difference in our society now compared to when I was a little kid. I honestly believe that the times we're living in now, we have more opportunity as a people than at any time in our country's history, bar none, hands down. Like not even there's no in my mind, there's no argument. All you have to do is look at the opportunities. You can get on YouTube and do the hard work and build a channel and become an entrepreneur. There are more entrepreneurs now than in any time, especially minorities, than at any time in our country's history. We've grown exponentially. And we need to be honest about our own poor choices that might have put us in a position where we're not getting anywhere. When we have a nation that gives handouts all the time, I know that as a retiree, I want to build a business. I want to build a organization. I want my media organization company to grow exponentially. But there's some times where I struggle doing the hard thing because I know that I'm getting a check from retiring from law enforcement every month. And I know that as much as that's a blessing, it's also a hindrance. I understand that. If I didn't get that, and I'm not trying to say I don't want it, I definitely want my money. I want my check. But if I didn't have that coming in regularly, I guarantee you I'd be much further along in building my organization. It would be much further along because I know that money, that the money that I make would help my family. I would be much further along. If I chose not to get a regular job, I would be much further along in being an entrepreneur than I am now, because I know that I can reach back and I know that every month that money is going to be in my bank account. So when you have, as much as I do believe welfare to be a good thing and is a necessary thing, I think being a lifelong welfare recipient, I think that's just silly, unless barring any issues that whether it's mental or physical that debilitates you completely. I think someone being a lifelong welfare recipient and never working is just silly. And I think those things have caused harm in our community. I think the sexual revolution has damaged our community, leading into the broken homes. So many issues that I think are impacting our society, are impacting our culture. The godlessness, when you don't have an ultimate moral standard to adhere to, then anything goes. Then I could walk away from my family, find somebody else. The grass is always greener on the other side. I think that we can understand the reality of racism in the world, but at the same time be willing to look in the mirror. And right now we're living in a culture that refuses, that tells a Black man that you don't need to look in the mirror because the problem is whitey over there. That's what we're being told as a nation, and that is only holding us back.